With the market currently playing out some very generous pullbacks, it is time to be doing our homework and discovering where are the likely probabilistic bouncy areas. With that said, welcome back to EllioTrades channel. I'm your host Krown again today, and a bit of an evolution of these videos as I want to address something that's been highly requested, which is essentially talking about where I'd be interested in playing bounces or perhaps even buying an asset for potentially the long term. Now, it goes without saying that this is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. However, and I should also say that trading is rather risky. In fact, it's incredibly risky. Most people lose trading. Anyways, more importantly with that, and in the context of these videos, I want to be doing this in the best way possible. So I'll be talking about specifically the daily time frame, areas that I believe there is a high probability for at minimum a bounce and potentially even a major low. And as we bring it forwards, I am going to dissect this into two areas essentially. One being a more aggressive area to be looking for these bounces, and two, a more conservative area, which are exactly as they sound. Now, when we talk about these probabilistic bounce areas, that is not to say that these are full-on reversals back onto, all-time highs or infinity or whatever, the clickbait of the day is, but more importantly, they just offer up an edge for a nice bounce area, which can be typically traded in my experience. However, again, not financial advice here. All right, cool. So let's start it out with Bitcoin as always. The reason why we started with Bitcoin is because Bitcoin generally judges the rest of the market's direction. So it's a good one to be going off of. And there's some very obvious levels here, funnily enough, actually in the 4 hour. And what I'm going to do right here is I'm actually going to go over to our regular charts. We're going to chart this one out very, very simply. So what I'm going to do is I am going to chart out the range highs. That's going to be right here. I'm going to chart out the daily range lows. That's going to be right here, obviously. And then we have the midpoint of the range, which is our last higher low on our medium time frames. That's going to be right here at just above $48,000 territory. So the way that I look at this is that as long as Bitcoin is, of course, in an uptrend on the short and medium term timeframes, which is denoted by remaining above this pivot point right here, I do look at, well, higher lows as playable for bounces and potentially even a trend trade. Problem is, trending moves are all stifled by our range highs at $52,000 until closed above on a higher time frame, specifically no less than a daily. If you want to be conservative, if you're more aggressive, could probably use a 4 hour, at which point, probably looking at moves back up towards $56,000 to $58,000, somewhere around there to be fair. Okay, cool. So if you are more aggressive within this region right here, and you are leaning into your belief that Bitcoin has essentially put in the lows already, well, you're probably looking at the current area for Bitcoin as a bit of a value area in this case, because you are right around the 618 Fibonacci retracement, and it would still be on a higher low as we have not taken out critically the 48,100 region right here. So what does that essentially align with? Do you have an opportunity for a bounce within this region right here? Yes, you do. Where could bounce targets be? A back up towards anywhere around $50,000 is completely fair game. However, if you are more conservative, there are a few things to be aware of right here. So in the last 24 hours, we did see Bitcoin reject the range highs. Not necessarily a bullish thing to be doing. Also confirming some hidden bearish divergence potential as well. And what I would say is if you are conservative and you do see any sort of a 4 hour closure even below our current wick low at 48,500, I would effectively say that this range is going to be resolved. You will see the daily play out, and at minimum, looking at a pullback down towards the low $47,000 territory, perhaps even as low down as low $46,000 territory. That would be my conservative area to be interested in buying for potentially even a long-term position, to be fair, but at minimum a bounce very likely back up into the mid 48s, maybe even $49,000 territory. So I do look at that as tradable myself. All right, so why is that all relevant? Again, because whatever direction Bitcoin goes, the rest of the market's probably going to go alongside with it. So if Bitcoin does go for that more aggressive higher low, well, can probably be more aggressive on the other assets that we'll look at in a second here. So let's move on to Ethereum. Ethereum rejected 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times at our 4130-ish region right here. That is again a good example of why we do wait for confirmation on a closing basis above the range highs. And in this case, we are, of course, seeing Ethereum come back down. So where would I be looking for on Ethereum? in order to get interested into playing a bit of a bouncy? Well, I'm looking somewhere around here. Why is that? That being between about 3750 to 3800 or so. And why is that? That is because it comes in from our prior wick range lows in this area right here. Also a retest of the falling wedge. And if you go the extra mile, we do see the 618 Fibonacci retracement around that region as well. If I actually do it properly, it's going to come in exactly at 3800 right there. So bit of a conservative play, yes, but I would be looking for bounces within this region, very likely back up somewhere around 3900 minimum. And of course, if you are bullish, well, you're just looking at that as, you know, another higher low before going to the moon and infinity. Anyways, moving on to symbol AVAX. This one's rather interesting right here. I do think that an aggressive estimate of a higher low could very easily come in at 110. That was our pullback target from yesterday. We have thus met it. So, well, after a bit of that, all good, I suppose. So if you are aggressive, you actually are looking at this on that 110 tick as the higher low. Again, exactly as we spoke about yesterday. What would confirm it as a higher low? Popping back above the 120-ish region, and could probably front run a range resolution to the upside back up to prior highs after that, to be fair. Now, let's say that this current potential higher low does not work out. Well, which by the way is at the 618 bearish retracement right there. Well, where would I be looking for and how would I know that it doesn't work out? I would be looking for a 4-hour closure below our current wick lows at 107.5. And I would be looking for moves at minimum down to $100 and very likely a bounce around that region. Again, do not confuse bounce with reversal. We're just talking about tradable bounces, most likely from a probabilistic standpoint. It's also your midpoint of the range, just a general rule. And below there, well, you got some big problems, probably looking at big bad moves back down somewhere below 90 bucks actually. Anyways, let's move on to the next one. Everyone's favorite one to make fun of, I guess, but this is Cardano. An interesting one right here. If you are aggressive, you're actually very likely looking at this move down to the low 140s as your next higher low. Does it look super strong to me? Well, my opinion does not need to be stated here. What would essentially validate bullish continuation on this one? Any sort of a daily closure above 158 with targets back up towards your prior range highs from early December, which we will put in right here at about 175, let's say. Now, with that said, if we do see this more aggressive higher low fail, which again would be about 140 or so, so any sort of a 4-hour closure below there, then I would be more conservatively looking for some nice bounce areas and potential buy areas somewhere down around the low 130s. Moving on to Terra Luna. This one's very interesting as well. Very aggressive here too. Technically speaking, still has higher lows on the 4-hour, but again, if Bitcoin trades down here, we're very likely going to find the next real bounce area at about $80. That's a big one. If $80 is lost on a higher time frame closure, I am looking more conservatively towards the mid 60s area for a very strong bounce, most likely. This has been one of the better actors long term here. So understand the order of operations. And again, the current potential low that it's putting in right here, that'll be negated with any sort of a 4-hour closure below $89, even on a 4-hour. So that is more aggressive one right there. So that is why we're going down to a lower time frame. Moving on to symbol DOT, and apologies on the very loud alerts in the background. Anyways, symbol DOT, again, gets rejected at our range highs. Okay, that's to be expected, you know, and or it's a more likely thing to be happening. So where are we looking for on a potential aggressive low? Well, if you are aggressive, you're actually looking right here. Does it look strong? No. If Bitcoin trades down, would you expect it to hold? Also no. Where would a more conservative estimate be on your next potential higher low? Somewhere right around here at about your $26.50-ish number. And I would be looking for bounces until you see any sort of closures above 31.5. Really not wise in my experience to be looking for any sort of major breakouts in this case up towards the, well, $38 to $39 regions. Okay, let's move on to the next one, symbol CRO. My LARP line's still in there, but funnily enough, they're still working, so that's good. I think we charted this one here last like a few days ago or something like that. Anyways, again, test your range highs. Very likely to pull back from your range highs. That is why we operate on closing bases. No closures above 67 cents does imply, well, at minimum, we come down to the median of the range at 58 cents. That is the more aggressive higher low region. Do I think that it holds? Again, my opinion is not necessary. How will you know that it does not hold? 4-hour closure below the last 4-hour low is 57.5 cents in this case. And I would be looking for this one, and more conservatively, and what I think is a little bit more likely to be honest with you as well, for a move somewhere back down around low 50 cents. That is where I would be looking for a much stronger bounce, most likely. And again, with all of these, it's not to say that they can't go lower. It's just it offers up a more defined edge. And in this case, coming down below these regions allows you to risk less if you do take on risk during these during this 51 to 52, or more like 52 to 54 cent test right there. It allows you to take on less risk, because in order to invalidate that as a potential bounce and maybe even reversal setup, you only have to wait until you take out the range lows. In this case, that's about 50 cents, just below 50 cents to be fair. So ultimately, it is, from the way that I look at things and the way that I judge things, a good setup, because in order to figure out if the trade is not going to work out, you risk a lot less than, let's say, longing from this area right here, hoping and praying that this is the higher low. So that is the advantage of being a little more conservative. You can have, you can have better entries, less risk involved with the position. Doesn't mean that it's not guaranteed to work out, or it doesn't mean that it is guaranteed to work out, more importantly. But it comes at the risk of maybe not getting in your position to begin with as well. Being more conservative does mean that you might be waiting for something that does not happen. So again, wrapping up Bitcoin right here, which very likely bleeds into the rest of the market. Any sort of a 4-hour closure below our current wick lows very likely does beget that next continuation down to the more conservative area, somewhere around 47,000, give or take some from that number. And what would invalidate this as essentially a higher low setup for the long term? Well, 45,500 on a daily closing basis. Below there, Bitcoin has a lot more problems than are worth talking about on a video like this. So I will shut this one off at that. I'm curious to see how this one goes. Does all of that make sense? Does all of that kind of flow well? Again, I want to differentiate things into aggressiveness and conservativeness and talk about the pros and cons with that. There's no right or wrong way. It's only right or wrong for you based off of your trading preferences or investment preferences. So hopefully that was in some way helpful. Looking forward to the feedback on a video like this. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.